Are you unhappy with the first two races? I'm not happy with the team, but I am unhappy with the results. The date was May 1, 1994. No one could explain why the air above Imola was so full of fear. As the sun set over the Italian track, a huge crowd of people watched in tense silence. Ayrton Senna was sitting in his Williams FW16 with his helmet down and his visor down. His hands were barely shaking on the driving wheel. Not even 24 hours ago, he said something that would always be remembered in Formula One. There are some things that we can't change. What happened next will chill you to the core. It was one last act of resistance, one last choice. Senna, the uneasy winner, wasn't just fast. He wouldn't give up. He was born in Sao Paulo in 1960 and won races in karting, Formula Ford, and Formula 3 before making it to Formula One in 1984. He had won 3 world titles for McLaren by 1991. Known for being so good at handling rain that they made competitors look like they were standing still. But awards never made him happy. In charge. That very close call when the car and reaction fused was his real prize. When the rules changed in 1994 and traction control and active suspension were made illegal, Senna left McLaren for Williams because the FW16 had won back-to-back titles. On paper, the move looked like it would give them power. In real life, it caused question. The band's electronics had hidden flaws that the frame could no longer hide. During winter tests, a car was found that could turn around its rear axle like a trapdoor. Engineers changed some settings. Senna didn't stop spinning. We've still taken advantage of the chance to get first place in Brazil and Japan with this new car and the return to passive rules. Proof that talent is fighting physics, but they quit both races. After each DNF, the frown that could be seen in interviews got deeper. He said that the FIA was interested in showmanship more than safety. He asked himself if Benetton's fast speed was really allowed. Because of crazy politics and bad behavior by some people. He seemed confident, but he was actually scared. Friends saw the change. Senna, who was usually friendly, became rude and spent the evenings by himself with telemetry reports. Balance was the word that kept coming up in his speech. Something the FW16 didn't have very often. He told David Brown, an engineer, that the driving felt dead and the back felt tense. These were strange words for someone who used to make harsh machines dance. So why did he keep driving if he was getting more and more unhappy? The answer lies in his duty to the millions of people in Brazil who got up early to watch him, to the sponsors who paid for hospital wings back home, and to his own moral code. Champions don't run away from trouble, they face it head-on. The stress followed him to the third round with Imola. The scene was set by 2 unfinished races, an uneasy country, and a machine that whispered deception. Senna showed up with great skill and a sense of fear. A difference that made co-workers uncomfortable. The winner had always shaped the risk to his liking. Risk was moving back for the first time. With each new session, it became a vote on whether intuition could beat doubt, and the gap was getting smaller. Senna knew it, but he kept going because he was sure that his and Brazil's job to win was stronger than their choice. Soon, the stress would make the last words that still make you cold. When the car turned bad. Ayrton Senna usually thought of machinery as an extension of her nerves and her plans. I felt like I could beat the Williams FW16. The 1994 regulation purge got rid of the computer aids that had kept the previous model stable. What was left was a narrow window chassis that punished any departure from perfection. In the first winter test at Estoril, the signs of FW16 were very clear. It had quick oversteer in the middle of a corner, vague steering input, and a back end that stepped out when the throttle was applied. Senna turned twice in one morning, which was not like him at all. Engineers can't find anything clear. The issues with balance were built into the aerodynamics, which are now free of active sensors. When Senna got to Imola, he had a notebook full of notes. Changes to the ride height, the damper curves, the tire pressure, and the wing angles. The times for practice looked good. On the radio, the Real story was told, but he still said he was temporary pole. He said in a low voice, "Rear is alive again. Friday. Front won't speak to me." At the end of each complaint were practical suggestions. Change bar, raise nose, soften springs. After that, Rubens Barrichello's Jordan did a flip at Variante Bassa. Senna ran quickly to the medical center with his mouth clenched. Even though his young apprentice lived, it was a fresh reminder of how weak flesh is when it meets metal. He double-checked the steering bolts, which was a first, when he got back to the workshop. Still acting up on Saturday morning, the car was acting up, but Senna pushed harder. "I don't know anything about it, so I need to leave." A bit too. He hit 138 miles per hour through Villeneuve during the second qualifying run before going into the pits to look at statistics. After a few minutes, Roland Ratzenberger's front wing broke during his qualifying run at 190 miles per hour. The spear went through concrete at Villeneuve and killed the 33-year-old man right away. Senna got to the trackside, took off his helmet, and stared, tears clearly visible. Back in the garage, he broke down and told Joe Ramirez, the team boss, "Mother Baseball can be mean. Too mean." He told the FIA that if they banned devices without changing the tracks, speed and safety would not be balanced. Here is proof. Lied down on the road. When he got back to his pit, he watched the replay in gloomy quiet and then asked for updated tire temperatures and steering rack measurements, as if getting the FW16 just right could still save the day. The connection between the driver and the car was breaking down. It took faith for each lap that the steering column would stay in place, the aero balance wouldn't change in the middle of a bend, and the tires, which had been cooled by safety car periods, would bite. When things are moving so fast, faith is a dangerous exchange. Senna had no choice, though. Dr. Sid Watkins asked him that night, "If we find answers tomorrow, we continue." But the most important question, whether the FW16 was really safe, was still open. Tricky. Senna thought it was his job to control things that couldn't be controlled. As dawn broke, duty turned into fate. The sad times for Imola. The weekend of the San Marino Grand Prix went like a bad dream that happened slowly. Fear on Friday, death on Saturday, and stress on Sunday. Every act is darker than the last one. By the morning of the race, Imola didn't feel like a place for sports as much as it did like a timer. It was a sad list of events, and it wasn't over yet. Being aware of how hard it will be to get the ground back. On April 29, Rubens Barrichello hit a curb at Variante Bassa, took off, and hit the fence with 95 miles per hour. Roland Ratzenberger died in a crash at the same building on April 30, 2017. On May 1, 2018, during warm-up, there was another crash. When Pedro Lamy and JJ Leto crashed, they sent flying objects into the crowd, hurting 7 people. From the pit wall, Senna watched the cleanup with his helmet under his arm and no sign of a bad mood. But it was easy to see that he was scared. Ayrton Senna spent the evening of April 30 alone in the Williams motor home, his race overalls still on. Mechanists remember that he watched Roland Ratzenberger's crash video over and over again, frame by frame, looking for a technical clue as if knowing how one death happened could stop another. But the tape only showed quiet. Senna called his sister Vivian in Brazil that night and told her he was very sad and upset. He first talked about retiring and hinted that Imola might be his last game in Europe if safety didn't get better. Soon after, Dr. Sid Watkins showed up with a wine bottle. Senna was the first legend Watkins had ever seen break. Usually it was after a crash. The doctor made his usual plea. "Leave now. Have fun with the life you've earned. I have nothing more to prove. Let's both quit." He looked at the floor and then told the doctor what would be his last words. "Listen, Sid. There are some things we can't change. I can't give up. I need to go on. The sentence sent 3 messages that still make you feel very cold. It was very clinical and almost cold. First, Senna admitted that control has its limits. For a driver whose job it was to take advantage of every variable they could control, like fuel load, tire temperature, and brake bias, saying they had no control was unheard of. Second, he said that the choice was based on duty, not want. I need to. Obligation, whether it was to Brazil, to sponsors, or to a code of honor that put bravery ahead of life. Third, the time was spoken less than 18 hours before he died at Tamboril. His words sound like a poem he wrote for himself. Imola's dark hours were 48 hours of all the bad things that could happen in a job. The champion who used to make speed look like a godlike quality now had to deal with technical doubt, changes in the rules, and death. There was only one question that everything led to. Could he still decide what would happen? The answer that came 1 lap later is very scary. When racing went green again on lap 6, there was a lot of stress. It would break in 1 minute. There are some things that we can't change. In his autobiography, written many years later, Watkins talked about the time he talked to Senna in the Williams motor home. I saw real fear in Ayrton's eyes for the first time. The doctor gave them one last way out: they could skip the race, fly home, and go fishing. I couldn't get him to not drive, so I had to accept it. He shook his head, though. The talk was over. Both men knew how important it was. Not any more fights. Not any more convincing. Psychologists look at high risk. This is the point where athletes call commitment threshold, because it's here that risk goes from being a deterrent to a sign of fate. Senna had already done it, but he still had one more race to go. He looked over the telemetry, changed the steering input, and asked engineers to make the rear anti-roll bar stiffer for the rest of the night. Small steps to get security back. He left the track for Hotel Castello at 10 p.m. The hotel workers said he had a light dinner, read some of the Gospel of John, and then had a bad night's sleep. The next day, on the grid, he placed the belts very carefully and then put a Brazilian flag inside the cabin as a tribute. The family of Ratzenberger if he won. Even the morning warm-up didn't help. He sent a message that the car is still pulling on turn-in. The team changed the steering column and added an 8 mm gap to make it more comfortable. Later, mechanics said that it had tiny cracks in it even before the race. For years, courts would argue about whether that change caused the crash, but at that moment, Senna just nodded, buckled up, and rolled to the grid. He didn't look like a man who was going to die soon. The press didn't hear those private last words until Watkins told the police about them after the accident. After going public, they froze everyone. Drivers who were proud of being able to control rockets with 700 horsepower started to wonder what they weren't able to control. Failures in the suspension, wings coming off, and angles of debris recorded in cruel millimeters. When Senna said what he did, the weekend wasn't seen as the fall of a brave hero, but as the last act of a man who knew he couldn't change things but still raced anyway. He crossed the line because he knew it was there. That clear, logical, and unvarnished understanding is what still makes you cold to the bone after more than 30 years. Now that the words were out loud and the choice was made, there was only one chapter left. The race itself took 12 minutes and changed the way Formula One races are run. Safety always. Lap 7, 12, and 8 seconds to go. The 1994 San Marino Grand Prix began with a cloud over it, both physically and figuratively. The lights went out at 2 p.m.